Hi, good morning. Happy Wednesday, everyone. I'm Irene and I'm here with Jane Bofsky from Supporting Strategies. And today we're going to discuss an employee's termination and departure from a business and what an employer may want to keep in mind when a departure or a termination from a business takes place. So a few categories and a few topics that we're going to discuss today, they include a severance payment. They can include a payout of any PTO or sick leave. Another question that comes up very often is return of company property, as well as benefits and what happens to benefits at time of departure from a company. So I'll get started on severance payments. So we get asked very often, what do we do with severance payments? Are they mandatory? Are they required if you're going to let go of an employee? They're actually not required. You can give a severance if you choose to terminate an employee. You can give a severance even at a voluntary resignation by an employee. One of the benefits from the legal end of a severance is that one of the exchanges for a severance payment would be a release of certain claims. What it would say is that the parties really don't have any claims against one another that they want to bring. And so this is really a very friendly departure from the company. It gives both the employee and the employer some comfort that there aren't any hard feelings and there's no claim to follow. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the employee cannot file a claim afterwards, and every situation is unique. However, it does give some comfort that there is some release of claims that is allowed in a severance. In addition to the release, which is something that a lot of my clients ask about, also there could be a restatement of any non-compete or non-solicitation that was otherwise in the employment agreement. And interestingly, also, if there is a severance agreement that is signed by both parties, if there was no employment agreement in the beginning, and now the employer would like to put in a non-solicitation clause, they're able to do so in the severance agreement. Again, and there are, of course, rules for this. You want to make sure you give additional time for the employee to have a chance to review with an attorney, as well as a lot of other specific rules that we won't have time to go over today. But certainly, if there are any questions, I'm always available to answer those. The severance agreements are always going to be very specific to the situation. They're always drafted individually. Certain clauses, of course, are things that carry over, but for the most part, these are very individualized to the employment relationship between the parties. Now I'll move on to our second category that comes up during a departure, and that could be a payout of PTO and sick time. We've seen a lot of companies offer and I've seen this oftentimes in the healthcare industry. They offer a PTO sick leave payout. And what that means is if an employee doesn't take their PTO time or their sick time for the year that they're allotted, at the very end of the year, they can actually get a payout for that time. So if it's a week, they can get a week's worth of pay. So of course, there are tax consequences to be careful of here, but also if there ever is a Department of Labor audit for whatever reason, even though the intent could have been to actually pay an employee for any time unused, the intent could be construed as a discouragement from employees taking their otherwise allotted PTO and sick time. And since sick time, especially in New York City, must be given to an employee by law, at minimum, depending, of course, on the size of the company, but at minimum for the smaller size companies, 40 hours a year once earned, it can be construed that it is a discouragement from taking that time, which could potentially have some ramification to it. So once again, that's something that should be reviewed if that's a policy that you want to offer. The next topic that comes up is the return of company property. So some companies give laptops, uniforms, cell phones, and other iPads even has been what we've been seeing most recently. And so if there was any company property that was given to an employee, it's very important at the time of departure from the company that the employee returns that. It's very important that it's in your policies and it states exactly after how long that company property will be returned. Likewise, if it's a employee that had sensitive information, somebody that was working in the finance department, or somebody that was part of a healthcare organization that might have some sensitive information that they might have, and for whatever reason may have on that computer. It is very important, if you find yourself in a situation that they're not returning that you actually take specific action to get that back, so that you can prove that you've made that effort to get that information back. In case there's ever a breach in the future, you can show that you've done everything on your part to get that back. And then the last topic, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but the last topic that comes to mind, that comes up rather often at time of an employee's departure from a company, are benefits. So of course, if healthcare benefits are offered, COBRA must be offered to the employee so that they can have continuing healthcare benefits. And if there are any other benefits that are provided, such as perhaps FSA benefits or HRA benefits, there should be a policy in place for all benefits at all times. And that policy must say how long those benefits, if a certain sum of money is kept in there, is still available to the employee. Now, this could change, the terms of this could change if the funds in the account were from the employee's pay versus an employer putting in their own funds. That can actually change the requirement for how long those funds must be available after termination or departure from the company. So now everything that we talked about in all these categories certainly have a lot of tax ramifications. So I'm actually going to hand this over to Jane just to discuss those various accounting and tax ramifications as well.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Irene. It was interesting. I was actually taking notes and some of the things you were saying to see how we could cross over between worlds. And I know that a lot of my clients don't have an employee handbook where they don't have those specific policies. And so, for example, if I go back to sick pay, I know you could have a contract that an employer must state that you could pay out sick leave, but I know that most of my clients don't have anything like that in place. And so if you just from my understanding from New York State, you're not really obligated. So you are obligated to provide the leave, but you're not obligated to pay out because the state doesn't, unless it's stated in the employment contract, which most people don't have. So see, it's very important to work, with an employment attorney like Irene and see how you could benefit for both the employee and the employer standpoint. So, but the idea is that with the sick pay, I know they're not supposed to be paying it out as opposed to vacation. So workers are entitled to have compensation, and for the unused vacation time after they quit, in New York State, they should pay out the employee for the earned unused vacation time when they resign or terminate it. So basically, when the standard vacation of paid time off, the employer is paying the employee cash compensation, and it's any other cash compensation. It's taxable and deductible by employer. And severance pay is also taxable. So it's taxable in the year that you receive it, and the employer will include that amount on the form W-2, and they will withhold the appropriate federal and state taxes. And so basically, with all the things we were talking about, all of these are, taxable events, but I think it goes back to the idea of making sure you have the right policy. So you're not obligated to pay more than you should be. And I think it's really, really important to have that in place, which I will now really go back and look through most of my clients and see if we could help with that, because I feel like this is something we haven't really paid attention to in the past. So thanks for, bringing that up to my attention as well. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot more questions. And if you please don't hesitate to reach out to both Irene and I would be happy to talk about it more. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.